This is my courtroom and you are nothing." The crack of a sudden slap rang through Judge Judy's courtroom like a gunshot. For a brief instant, everything seemed to freeze. The bailiff stopped mid-step. The audience inhaled sharply. Judge Judy's hand hovered above the bench, her face unreadable, but her eyes burned with a heat that could cut through steel. Karen Foster, the woman who had just done the unthinkable, stood frozen with her hand still partly raised, her chest rising and falling, her face caught between anger and disbelief. Half a minute later, she would be in handcuffs, crying and pleading for forgiveness as cameras captured every second and millions watched what would soon become one of the most talked about courtroom moments ever. But before that slap, before everything went viral, before hashtags flooded the internet, before Karen's life began to fall apart, there was a story filled with pride, humiliation, and one reckless choice that turned an entitled woman into a headline across the nation. And what happened wasn't just simple disrespect. It wasn't just poor behavior. It was the exact moment arrogance collided with justice, and justice responded harder than anyone expected. Rewind the clock to where it all started. What began as a normal small claims case quickly spiraled into less than a minute of chaos that ended with a woman in handcuffs and viewers across the internet reacting in shock and satisfaction. It was an ordinary taping day at the Judge Judy studio in Los Angeles. Cameras were set, the gallery was packed, and the usual murmur of voices filled the room before the gavel struck. No one, not the producers, not the crew, not even the bailiff, had any idea that this particular case would soon be replayed everywhere online. The case scheduled that afternoon was Karen Foster versus Monica Diaz, a straightforward dispute involving a scratched car door and an unpaid repair cost of $1,200. Routine, nothing out of the ordinary. But as people often say, small cases can reveal big personalities. And Karen Foster was about to show exactly how extreme unchecked entitlement can become. Judge Judy, experienced and steady after years on the bench, had encountered every type of person imaginable: liars, manipulators, scammers, and those who constantly played the victim. Yet while reviewing the file, something unusual caught her attention. Attached to the claim was a handwritten addition from the plaintiff. It wasn't a simple explanation of damages. It was a rant, 3 full pages packed with insults, accusations, and personal attacks aimed not only at the defendant, but also at the DMV and law enforcement, and even traffic rules themselves. That was the first signal. This case wasn't really about a car door. It was about control. Karen Foster, a 41-year-old suburban realtor, active on social media and proudly calling herself a truth warrior, had filed a claim on her own. She wasn't there to seek fairness. She wanted validation. She wanted to embarrass her neighbor, prove she was right, and turn the courtroom into her personal spotlight. On the opposite side sat Monica Diaz, a 29-year-old MT with a composed, slightly tired expression, the kind of look that comes from dealing with real emergencies. She had accidentally scraped Karen's car while backing out of their shared driveway, but she immediately offered to cover the repair costs. Karen refused. For her, an apology wasn't enough. She wanted consequences. The camera started rolling. The bailiff called the case. Judge Judy walked in with her usual firm presence, instantly quieting the room. "Foster versus Diaz," the bailiff announced. Karen adjusted her blazer, fixed her hair, and gave a confident smile toward the camera. In her mind, this was her moment, her win. What she didn't realize was that it would be the last time she smiled like that for a long while. Judge Judy lifted her gaze from the file, locking eyes with Karen. "Hey, Miss Foster," she said, "you're asking for $1,200 in damages. Tell me what happened." Karen's response immediately set the tone. It was filled with arrogance, disrespect, and an ego far too large for the room. Within moments, that same ego would push her toward a shocking decision, one that would damage her reputation and make headlines. Karen looked like she had walked straight out of a reality TV casting call. Platinum blonde hair, oversized sunglasses resting on her head, a designer handbag placed beside her like a prop. Her confidence didn't just enter the room, it dominated it. She carried herself like someone who believed rules applied to everyone else, never to her. She began not with facts, but with dramatics. "Your Honor," she said slowly, stretching her words as if speaking to someone beneath her, "this woman completely ruined the door of my Lexus. my brand new Lexus, and then tried to avoid paying what she owes. It's not about the money, she continued, her voice dripping with superiority. It's about respect. Every sentence carried the tone of someone unused to hearing the word no without reacting badly. Judge Judy raised an eyebrow, a subtle gesture, but one the audience recognized immediately. It was her quiet warning. Karen missed it completely. She was too focused on performing. Her hands moved dramatically, her voice growing louder with each statement. Honestly, I shouldn't even be here. If the police had done their jobs properly, she would have been cited for reckless driving. But no, they took her side, because apparently being an MT means you can do whatever you want these days. A murmur spread through the audience. Even the bailiff tilted his head slightly, as if unsure he'd heard correctly. Across the room, Monica Diaz remained still, her hands folded neatly, her expression steady. She had seen people at their lowest, injured, grieving, desperate, and compared to that, this situation barely shook her. Even Monica, calm as she was, looked slightly taken aback by the bitterness in Karen's voice. Judge Judy's tone sliced through the tension, steady and firm. Miss Foster, let me remind you, this is not a place to attack public servants. Stay focused on the case. Karen gave a smug smile. Oh, I am focused on the case, Your Honor, but when the system is clearly biased, Miss Foster, Judy's voice dropped noticeably lower. That was the second warning. Still, Karen refused to back down. I'm just saying, I've done my homework. I understand how this works. I've watched hundreds of courtroom cases online. I know my rights, and honestly, I don't think I need a lecture about courtroom behavior when— Stop talking. The command cut through her sentence instantly. The entire room went silent. Judge Judy's pen hovered above her notepad. If you interrupt me again, this case will be finished before it even begins. Do you understand? Karen's jaw tightened, her face flushing with restrained anger. She forced a smile, but it didn't reach her eyes. Of course, Your Honor. It was the kind of fake agreement everyone recognized. The quiet moment before everything falls apart. Anyone watching could sense it. Karen Foster wasn't just being difficult. She was a ticking time bomb. She hadn't come just to win. She came to prove she was smarter than the judge herself. And that decision would cost her dearly. Across from her, Monica Diaz remained composed. She wore her EMT uniform, not for attention, but because she had just come off a long overnight shift. Her hair was neatly tied back, her expression tired yet focused. While Karen radiated tension, Monica brought a quiet steadiness to the room, the kind of presence that calms chaos without saying a word. Judge Judy turned toward her. Miss Ayes, let's hear your side. Monica spoke gently but clearly. Your Honor, I did accidentally scrape Miss Foster's car door while backing out of our shared driveway. I immediately offered to cover the repairs. I even contacted a body shop myself, got an estimate, and sent it to her the same day. She refused it. She said it wasn't enough and insisted the entire door be replaced instead of repaired. She opened a small folder and placed a neat stack of documents forward. These are our messages, the insurance report, and the payment offer I made. Judge Judy reviewed the papers, nodding slightly. You offered $1,200, the exact amount she's suing for. Yes, Your Honor, Monica replied. I wanted to settle it right away. I didn't want any conflict. But the next day, she left a note on my door calling me a criminal and saying she would make an example out of me. A ripple of uneasy laughter spread through the courtroom. Karen's eyes narrowed sharply. Oh, please, she muttered, just loud enough for the microphones to catch. So, Judge Judy immediately looked up. Miss Foster, if you speak out of turn again, I will hold you in contempt. Do you understand? Karen crossed her arms, muttering something under her breath that sounded very close to whatever. Monica continued without reacting. I didn't want things to escalate, Your Honor. I work in emergency medicine. I've seen how quickly situations can get worse. I just wanted to pay for the damage and move on. For a brief moment, the camera would have caught a subtle look of approval on Judge Judy's face, the kind she reserved for people who stayed composed under pressure. At that point, it was obvious who the audience sympathized with. Monica came across as calm, responsible, and sincere, while Karen's attitude only made her seem more unreasonable. But what no one realized yet, not the judge, not Monica, not even the viewers, was how far Karen would go once She felt control slipping away. The warning signs were already there. The restless foot tapping, the heavy sighs, the tightening of her jaw. Soon, those cracks would shatter completely, because for someone like Karen, losing wasn't just a setback, it was humiliation. And when humiliation mixes with entitlement, it becomes something volatile. The tension in the courtroom grew heavier. It was the kind of silence that comes before a storm. Cameras continued rolling. The audience leaned forward, and Judge Judy held her pen like she was ready to strike. "All right," she said at last. "Let's clarify the facts." She turned to Karen. "You're claiming Miss Diaz caused $1,200 in damage to your car door. She admits she scraped it and offered to pay that exact amount. So tell me, why are we here?" Karen blinked, slightly thrown off by the direct question. "Because, Your Honor," she began, her tone coated with forced patience. "This isn't just about a dent. It's about principle. My car was brand new, and her carelessness completely ruined it. She didn't just damage the door. She damaged my reputation. Do you have any idea what it's like to show up to a client meeting in a car that looks like it's been chewed up by a lawnmower?" A few quiet chuckles came from the audience. That was her first mistake. She mistook that reaction for support. Judge Judy's eyebrow shifted slightly, a subtle signal to anyone familiar with her courtroom. Trouble was coming. "Your reputation?" she repeated, her tone flat and controlled. Karen nodded firmly. "Yes, I'm a professional. Image matters in my line of work." This wasn't just physical damage. It caused emotional stress. Embarrassment. I couldn't even drive my car without people staring at the scratch. Judge Judy remained calm, almost too calm. "You're suing for emotional distress over a scratched car door." Karen folded her arms. "I'm suing because I deserve compensation for everything. And honestly, if you ask me, $1,200 is generous." I could have asked for more. From across the room, Monica's calm voice broke in. "She sent me a message saying she wanted $5,000 or she'd make me regret it." Judge Judy's head turned sharply toward Karen. "Is that true?" Iviriku. Karen let out a small, dismissive laugh, the kind that never ends well in a courtroom. Come on. I was upset. It was just something I said. Something that sounds very much like extortion." Judge Judy replied, her tone sharp. Karen froze, realizing her attempt to brush it off had completely failed. "That's not what I meant," she said quickly. Judge Judy leaned back slightly, folding her arms. "Miss Foster, do you have receipts showing you paid for these repairs?" Karen shuffled through her bag, papers slipping and rustling. "Well, not exactly receipts, but I have quotes, screenshots, and not receipts," Judge Judy repeated flatly. "So you haven't actually paid for any repairs?" Karen hesitated. "Not yet. I wanted to make sure I'd be reimbursed first. To get reimbursed first." "So," Judge Judy said, her voice tightening, "you're suing for money you haven't even spent." Karen opened her mouth, then closed it again, unable to respond. A quiet murmur spread through the audience, that familiar sound that meant a lesson was coming. "Let me explain something," Judge Judy said. "No. Judge Judy said, "You can't sue over something hypothetical. Either you paid for it, or you didn't. You can't ask the court to fund an assumption." This time, the laughter was louder. Karen's expression hardened, her eyes flashing. The smirk she once wore was gone. She wasn't used to being the joke. What she didn't notice was how obvious her frustration had become. Her hands slightly shaking, her voice losing steadiness. This was where everything started to fall apart. In the minutes ahead, Karen would cross one line after another, each worse than the last, until she made a choice that would cost her freedom and turn her into one of the most infamous plaintiffs ever seen on Judge Judy. By now, the entire courtroom could feel the shift, that subtle moment when irritation turns into open hostility. Karen's breathing grew heavier, her lips pressed together so tightly that her lipstick began to crack at the edges. She was losing control, not just of the case, but of herself. Judge Judy calmly reviewed the evidence Monica had submitted, printed emails, text messages, photos, even a time-stamped insurance estimate. Everything was organized, clear, and factual. In fact, Karen, on the other hand, had a messy stack of loose papers, screenshots, and what looked like printouts from online arguments. She dropped the pile onto the podium with unnecessary force. She snapped. "That's my evidence. If anyone even cares to look at it." Judge Judy didn't react. "You may hand it to the bailiff." The bailiff, steady as ever, collected the papers and placed them on the judge's desk. Judge Judy flipped through them briefly, her expression unchanged. Miss Foster, she said, half of this is social media chatter. I'm not interested in your online disputes. I'm interested in facts. Karen laughed, a sharp, exaggerated sound meant to regain control. Oh, so screenshots don't count as evidence anymore. That's convenient. And not when they come from Facebook comments, Judge Judy replied dryly. A few people in the audience chuckled. And just like that, Karen's composure cracked even further. She shot an angry look toward the crowd, her voice rising. You think this is funny? You have no idea what it's like dealing with someone like her. She pretends to be innocent, but she's manipulative. She damages my car and then acts like the victim. Typical. Judge Judy's gaze sharpened. Miss Foster, lower your voice. This is not a reality show. Karen rolled her eyes dramatically. A move anyone familiar with Judge Judy's courtroom knew was a serious mistake. But she didn't stop. She pointed directly at Monica. She's just trying to play the sweet little hero because she's in uniform. I can see right through it. You people always side with whoever acts humble. A loud gasp moved through the courtroom. Even the bailiff shifted slightly forward, just in case. Judge Judy's pen paused mid-note. Her eyes lifted slowly like a storm building. You people? She repeated quietly. Karen stumbled. I didn't mean. You meant exactly what you said, Judge Judy cut in. And I strongly suggest you remember where you are before you speak again. Karen's expression twisted. She tried to recover, but her pride held her back. Well, excuse me for being honest. Judge Judy leaned forward, her voice cold. Honesty isn't your issue, Miss Foster. Arrogance is. Another ripple moved through the audience. The tension was reaching its peak. Karen's face flushed deep red. You know what? I don't appreciate being talked down to, she snapped. Judge Judy's reply came low and controlled. Then don't give me a reason to. It was precise and final, the kind of line that could have ended everything right there. But Karen refused to stop. Her voice shook with anger. I came here for justice, not to be insulted by some TV personality pretending to be a real judge. The audience gasped loudly, the sound echoing through the room. Even Monica's calm expression broke for a moment in disbelief. Judge Judy's face went completely still. The gavel was no longer just a symbol. It became authority in action. For a long moment, Judge Judy didn't move. No words, no expression, just quiet, controlled intensity from someone who had spent decades confronting arrogance and was about to do it again. The air in the room felt different, heavier. Even the faint background noise seemed to disappear. Karen stood at the podium, trying to hold on to her confidence, but it was slipping away piece by piece. Finally, Judge Judy spoke, calm, steady, and far more intimidating than if she had raised her voice. Miss Foster, she said, I've been a licensed attorney since 1965. I served as a family court judge for over 20 years before ever stepping onto television. I've handled more cases than you've scrolled through online posts. So let me clarify something before you embarrass yourself further. I am not pretending. Her voice never rose, but every word landed with weight. The courtroom fell completely silent. Even Karen hesitated, caught somewhere between defiance and unease. Judge Judy continued, her tone cutting clean through the quiet. And if you speak to me with that kind of disrespect again, I will end this case immediately, and you will leave here responsible for the defendant's court costs as well as your own. Are we clear? Karen's lips parted, but no words came out at first. She swallowed hard. Yes, Your Honor, she finally said, her voice noticeably weaker. Judge Judy leaned back slightly, her eyes still fixed on her. Good. Then let's proceed like adults. She turned toward Monica. Miss Diaz, you mentioned you have repair estimates from a certified auto shop. Yes, Your Honor, Monica replied, sliding another document forward. I also included photos from the day the incident happened. Judge Judy reviewed them briefly and nodded. Reasonable, professionally done. The total matches the amount you offered. You even documented the damage, very organized. Then her attention shifted back to Karen, her tone calm again, but with an edge beneath it. Miss Foster, why did you reject this offer? Karen's expression tightened. Because it wasn't enough. I told you my car is a luxury vehicle. The paint requires special treatment. Show me proof, Judge Judy interrupted. A professional estimate for those additional repairs. Karen hesitated. Don't have it printed, but I emailed. No, Judge Judy cut in sharply. You either have it or you don't. I mean, I could get it. Karen tried again. That's not how this works, Judge Judy replied, her voice suddenly sharp. You don't gather evidence when it suits you. You bring it when you file your claim. Karen's face flushed red. Twisting what I'm saying. No, Miss Foster, Judge Judy responded, her tone colder now. You're twisting reality. A murmur spread through the audience, the clear sign that public opinion had completely shifted. Monica lowered her gaze slightly, uncomfortable watching everything unfold. Judge Judy folded her hands together. Let me make this very clear. This is my courtroom. If you interrupt again, argue unnecessarily, or roll your eyes one more time, I will have you removed. Understood? Karen's nostrils flared. Fine, she said bitterly. You're obviously biased anyway. The entire courtroom reacted with a sharp gasp. Even the cameraman shifted, sensing the tension spike instantly. Judge Judy tilted her head slowly, a faint expression crossing her face. Not amusement, but disbelief. Biased, she repeated. Biased against what, Miss Foster? Accountability? Karen said nothing. Her silence answered for her. Judge Judy's voice lowered once more, steady and controlled. Take a moment and think carefully, because right now you're standing at a crossroads. You can choose to behave like a plaintiff or like a problem. Oh. Karen's fists tightened at her sides, her jaw quivering. The warning had been given. She still had a chance to leave with nothing more than a wounded pride and a rejected claim, but the defiance in her eyes flared again. That last spark of arrogance was about to ignite the most disastrous half-minute ever seen in Judge Judy's courtroom. The entire room sank into a strange, heavy silence, the kind that feels alive, thick with the sense that something is about to go terribly wrong. Karen's grip on the podium turned her knuckles pale. Behind her forced smile, tension brewed, humiliation, anger, and disbelief swirling together as she struggled to accept that anyone, especially Judge Judy, would challenge her. The judge's words still lingered in the air. Act like a plaintiff or act like a problem. Karen made her choice, and it was the wrong one. Her voice shook with anger. I'm tired of this, she snapped. You've been against me from the start. You let her speak as long as she wants. But the moment I defend myself, suddenly I'm arrogant or disrespectful. Judge Judy remained composed. Because you're not answering the question, Miss Foster. You're putting on a show. That word, show, hit harder than anything before it. Karen's eyes widened, her mouth falling open. A show? You think this is an act? I think, Judge Judy replied evenly, you care more about hearing yourself talk than telling the truth. The audience reacted instantly, murmurs, gasps, heads shaking. Karen's breathing grew uneven, her face turning deep red. You know what? She spat, pointing toward the bench. You're nothing but a bully in a robe, a washed-up old woman pretending to stay relevant on TV. The reaction this time was pure shock. Even the court stenographer paused mid-typing. Judge Judy didn't flinch. She didn't blink. Calmly, she said, a bailiff. But before he could move, Karen leaned forward, her voice trembling with fury. You don't intimidate me. I could run circles around you if you weren't hiding behind that little gavel. And then, in an instant no one expected, she crossed the line. Karen lunged forward, too fast for the cameras to adjust, and slammed her hand down on the bench. The crack rang out like thunder. Don't interrupt me, she shouted, striking the edge again for emphasis. And it wasn't a direct hit, but it was far too close. Papers from Judge Judy's desk scattered into the air, drifting down like startled birds. The bailiff reacted immediately, grabbing Karen's arm before she could move again. The courtroom erupted, gasps, shouting, the clink of metal as he restrained her. Karen twisted, disbelief written across her face. Let go of me. I didn't touch her. Judge Judy rose slowly. No shouting, no drama, just pure authority that instantly shrank the room. You're finished, she said, her voice cold and firm. Karen froze, panic replacing defiance. What? No, wait. You raised your hand at me, Judge Judy continued. You struck this bench. That is assault in a courtroom. The bailiff's radio crackled. Within seconds, 2 deputies entered from the side, their presence turning the tension into something icy and final. Karen shook her head, her voice breaking. I didn't mean to. It wasn't. Intent doesn't erase action. Judge Judy cut in sharply. You've crossed the line from disrespect into criminal conduct. The room fell silent. The only sound left was Karen's uneven breathing and the soft steps of the deputies moving closer. For the first time, her confidence disappeared. Please, she whispered, tears forming. I didn't mean it, but it was too late. Judge Judy looked straight toward the camera. Let this be a lesson to everyone watching. Disrespect has consequences. You do not raise your hand to a judge. Not here, not here. Karen's voice cracked, desperate now. Please, I didn't touch you. Judge Judy didn't waver. No, Miss Foster, but you tried, and that's enough. Deputies stepped in. The sharp click of handcuffs echoed through the courtroom. In less than a minute, Karen Foster went from a confident plaintiff to a criminal defendant, her life unraveling in front of millions of viewers. But that moment was only the start. As she was escorted out, the cameras kept rolling, and the internet was already lighting up. When the courtroom doors shut behind her, a heavy silence settled over the room. Every camera remained fixed. Every person in the gallery sat still, eyes on Judge Judy, the only steady presence in the aftermath of chaos. For several long seconds, she said nothing. She simply stood there, hands resting on the bench, regaining composure after the shock. Then, with complete control, she turned toward the camera. "Ladies and gentlemen," she said evenly, "a courtroom is not a playground. It's not a stage for outbursts or tantrums. When someone steps over that boundary, the law answers in kind." Her tone was steady, almost too steady. That quiet control carried the weight of a decision about to fall. Behind the scenes, the bailiff was already speaking with the deputies, laying out exactly what had happened, something viewers would soon watch replayed again and again, in slow motion. Karen Foster, overwhelmed by anger, had struck the bench with such force that the impact shook the judge's papers and knocked a pen clear off the desk. For the online world, that instant became everything. A perfectly timed frame capturing Karen's hand in motion, Judge Judy's piercing glare, and the bailiff stepping forward, all caught in crystal-clear detail from multiple angles. By the time the program returned from break, the footage had already spread across social media. Karen hitting Judge Judy's bench, an act she would regret almost immediately. Justice served her began trending within minutes. But the real consequences weren't unfolding online. They were happening just outside in the courthouse hallway. Karen now sat on a bench, wrists cuffed, the anger that once fueled her completely gone. Her makeup had run, her breathing uneven. "This is crazy," she murmured, partly to herself and partly to the deputy standing nearby. "I didn't even touch her. It was just emotion." The deputy gave no response. He had heard it countless times before, the same desperate justifications, the same shock, when reality set in and consequences became unavoidable. Inside the courtroom, Judge Judy spoke quietly with her producers and a court officer. "Are you pressing charges?" One of them asked in a low voice. Her expression didn't shift. "Yes," she replied firmly. "We'll let the district attorney determine the charges. Assault, contempt, possibly both. I've dealt with arrogance, I've dealt with dishonesty, but physical hostility in this courtroom, never." The audience remained seated in stunned silence, unsure whether they had just witnessed a real event or a moment destined for television history. At the defendant's table, Monica Diaz stood quietly, her hands folded, eyes shimmering, not from fear, but from disbelief at what she had just seen unfold. Justice in that moment had defended itself. Judge Judy turned toward her, her voice softening slightly. "Miss Diaz, I'm sorry you had to go through that. You showed more respect and composure in 5 minutes than your neighbor managed throughout her entire case." Monica gave a small nod, her voice unsteady. "Thank you, Your Honor." Judge Judy lifted her gavel, but she wasn't finished. The room still needed to hear what came next. "Let me make this absolutely clear," she said, addressing both the gallery and the camera. "A courtroom is a place of order. It exists so disputes can be settled without chaos or violence. The moment someone raises a hand, even in frustration, they challenge the very system meant to protect fairness." The room hung onto every word. Even the faint hum of the camera, adjusting its focus, could be heard as it moved closer, capturing the intensity in her expression. "Miss Foster didn't just show disrespect to me," she continued. "She disrespected every individual who enters this courtroom expecting justice, not hostility. She treated this like entertainment. It is not." She struck the gavel once. The sharp crack echoed through the room like thunder. The case dismissed, and Miss Foster will now face criminal review for her actions here today. That statement quickly became the defining line of the episode, splashed across thumbnails, headlines, and hashtags everywhere. As the show wrapped, producers were already fielding calls from major outlets. TMZ, CNN, even late-night programs requesting the footage. But what most people didn't immediately see was that Karen Foster's situation was far from over. Being removed from the courtroom wasn't the end. It was only the beginning. The matter moved into an actual court with formal charges under consideration. And once the district attorney's office began reviewing her history, new details surfaced that made that single outburst seem minor by comparison. Because this incident wasn't her first encounter with legal trouble, not even close. Within 2 hours of the courtroom emptying, headlines were spreading rapidly. Clips of the moment played repeatedly, slowed down, zoomed in, edited with dramatic effects. Yet inside the studio, away from viral reactions and comment sections, Judge Judy wasn't celebrating. She was angry, not over what had been directed at her personally, but over what it symbolized. In a follow-up segment recorded later that day, she returned to the bench. The lighting was dimmer now, her tone carrying even more weight. People watch this program, she said, looking straight into the camera to see how the justice system works, to understand accountability. But today, we witnessed something troubling, something that shows how far someone will go when ego overrides respect. The audience remained completely silent, absorbing every word. This was no longer entertainment. It was a message. And Miss Foster didn't just lose her case. She went on. She lost her control, her credibility, and now her freedom, all because she refused to accept being wrong. Her tone sharpened, firm and unyielding. I've spent decades teaching that actions bring consequences. What we saw wasn't just arrogance. It was aggression, and aggression has no place in a civilized society. She paused, allowing the words to settle over the room before leaning forward, her gaze intense. Courtroom Law 101. You do not raise your voice, your hand or your temper toward a judge, ever. Because when you cross that boundary, you're not just showing disrespect to a single individual, you're undermining the very foundation of order itself. And once order collapses, chaos takes over. The camera shifted between Judy's expression, the now empty plaintiff's, stand where Karen had been standing less than an hour earlier, and the gavel resting beneath her hand. But don't misunderstand, she said firmly. In my courtroom, chaos does not prevail. With that, she struck the gavel sharply, the sound echoing through the room. By the end of the week, the situation had escalated beyond television. The case of the state of California versus Karen Foster became the next chapter in a story that had already captured widespread attention. Responding to both the footage and public reaction, the district attorney formally charged Karen with assault on a judicial officer, disorderly behavior, and contempt of court. The story spread even further. News outlets analyzed the incident frame by frame. Behavioral experts weighed in on her actions, while legal analysts discussed how rare and serious it was for anyone to make physical contact, even indirectly, with a judge in a televised courtroom. Public sentiment was clear. Karen had crossed a line. At the same time, Judge Judy's composed and controlled response earned widespread respect. Her ability to remain steady under pressure became an example of how authority should be handled in moments of disorder. One viral post captured the sentiment perfectly. She didn't raise her voice. She upheld justice. A week later, during her arraignment, Karen stood before a real courtroom. There were no cameras, no bright lights, no audience, just the stark reality of a legal setting where every word carried consequence. When asked if she wished to speak, her voice broke for the first time. She said, "A stark reality one," she said. I lost control. I was embarrassed and I reacted without thinking. Her attorney attempted to minimize the situation, describing it as a brief lapse in judgment, but the judge remained unconvinced. "Lapse," he responded. "That could have resulted in far more serious consequences." So, Karen was sentenced to 30 days in county jail, with all but 10 days suspended. She was also required to complete anger management classes and community service. In addition, she was fined for contempt and permanently prohibited from appearing in any televised courtroom proceedings. As reporters gathered outside the courthouse, Karen shielded her face from view. The same person who had once walked confidently into a courtroom demanding attention was now asking for privacy. While she gradually disappeared from public attention, the footage of the incident did not. It became a defining cultural moment, a clear example of arrogance colliding with accountability and losing. In a later segment, Judge Judy addressed the situation with a measured tone that captured the deeper meaning behind it all. "A justice isn't about humiliation," she explained. "It's about correction. Some individuals need penalties, others need reminders, and a select few need to be stopped before they cause real harm." She looked directly into the camera, her gaze intense and unwavering. Karen Foster learned that lesson the hard way. Let her experience stand as a warning to anyone who mistakes ego for strength. Her voice softened slightly as she continued. Real strength is knowing when to remain quiet. Wisdom is recognizing when you're wrong. And justice, she said, lightly tapping the gavel, is understanding how to respond when someone forgets both. The audience responded with quiet applause, not out of amusement, but out of respect. What no one realized at the time was that Karen's story wasn't entirely over. There was still one final turn ahead, a possibility of redemption that no one expected, beginning inside a jail cell and carried through a handwritten letter that would eventually arrive on Judge Judy's desk weeks later. Within just 24 hours, the clip of Karen being placed in handcuffs inside the courtroom had reached millions of views. It spread across every platform, edited videos with dramatic soundtracks, reaction clips, and commentary debating whether the moment represented justice or public humiliation. Yet inside the courtroom that day, after everything had settled, only one feeling remained: silence. A deep, reflective stillness filled the space. The spectators sat motionless, their attention fixed entirely on Judge Judy. No one shifted. No one spoke. The only sound was the faint hum of cameras still recording, capturing a moment that felt less like television and more like accountability unfolding in real time. Then came the deliberate sound of the gavel striking the bench. The sharp crack echoed through the room, and the audience exhaled almost simultaneously, part relief, part awe. Everyone present understood they had witnessed something unforgettable. Judge Judy didn't react with pride or satisfaction. She didn't smile or celebrate. Instead, she stood quietly, looking down at the scattered papers left behind, the visible aftermath of Karen's actions. Then she spoke, her voice calm but firm. "How someone behaves in a courtroom shows who they are when no one is shielding them," she said. And today Miss Foster revealed exactly who she becomes when that composure disappears. The room remained completely still. Even the camera operators hesitated to move. Across the room, Monica Diaz, the EMT who had endured Karen's hostility with patience, quietly wiped a tear from her face. It wasn't sympathy, but disbelief at witnessing someone's pride unravel so completely. Moments later, the bailiff returned with a brief update. "A defendant has been escorted safely," he said. Judge Judy gave a small nod. "Good," she replied, before turning her attention back to Monica. "Miss Diaz, you've shown more patience than anyone could reasonably expect. The court rules in your favor. You are awarded your costs, and this matter is now concluded." Monica's eyes widened slightly. "Thank you, Your Honor. You don't owe me gratitude," Judy replied. "Oh, you owe that to yourself for handling disorder with composure." Then, turning toward the audience, she added one final thought. "I never confuse kindness with weakness. Calm individuals succeed in my courtroom because truth doesn't require volume. It requires proof." The audience responded with respectful applause, not the light, amused reaction that sometimes followed her sharp remarks, but something more meaningful: relief, appreciation, a sense of release. This wasn't just a ruling, it felt like a reset of values. As the cameras slowly faded out, there was an almost tangible sense of relief among viewers who had encountered people like Karen before. They had just witnessed not only justice being delivered, but firmly upheld. And yet, what followed proved that even the most stubborn pride can crack when someone is forced to face themselves honestly. While the internet mocked Karen Foster relentlessly, she sat alone in a holding cell, without her phone, without an audience, without the image she once relied on, writing a letter that would change everything. 3 weeks later, that letter arrived. It came in a simple white envelope addressed to Judge Judith Schindlin, marked confidential with an unsteady signature in the corner. The handwriting inside was small and uneven, with faint smudges where tears had clearly fallen. Judy's assistant, who had handled countless letters ranging from angry critics to grateful viewers, hesitated briefly before handing it over. "This one's from her," the assistant said quietly. "Karen Foster." Judy took the envelope, turned it once in her hands, then carefully opened it. Inside were 3 pages written in blue ink. It began plainly. "Your Honor, I don't expect forgiveness. I just want you to know that I understand now." The letter described the days following the incident that had spread everywhere. Karen wrote about sitting in her cell, replaying the moment repeatedly, the surge of anger, the loss of control, the expression on Judy's face, just before deputies stepped in. "I thought you humiliated me," she wrote. "But the truth is, I humiliated myself. You didn't break me. I did that. You just showed me the reality." She described her first night in custody when another inmate quietly recognized her from television. Karen had covered her face and cried until morning. By the time she was released 10 days later, her identity had already been defined by that single moment. Everywhere she looked, there it was. Videos, edits, commentary. Her job had been suspended. Her teenage daughter refused to attend school because classmates kept showing her the clip. "It wasn't you who ruined my life," Karen admitted. "It was my pride, my ego, my belief that I was always right." Then came a shift. "I started anger management classes last week. My counselor said accountability is the first step toward change, so this letter is mine. Thank you for stopping me before things got worse. I'm sorry." Judy finished reading, folded the pages neatly, and placed them back in the envelope. She sat silently for a moment. Finally, she looked up at her assistant. "Send her a message," she said. "What should I write?" Judy paused briefly, then spoke clearly. "Accountability accepted. Continue on the right path." Outside that courtroom, the conversation continued. The episode became one of the most watched segments in the show's history, gathering hundreds of millions of views across platforms. Clips of the incident and Judy's closing remarks were analyzed in classrooms and debated across media. But its impact extended beyond entertainment. In Los Angeles, court officials launched a Respect the Gavel initiative to educate the public about proper courtroom behavior. Judges across the country referenced the moment as an example of why discipline and respect still matter. On social media, something unexpected happened. The ridicule began to fade, replaced by reflection. People shared their own experiences, moments when anger cost them relationships, opportunities, or respect. The viral clip became less about one person and more about a shared lesson. As for Karen, she slowly began rebuilding her life. After completing anger management and hundreds of hours of community service at a legal aid center, she started speaking publicly. She referred to that day as the moment everything collapsed and everything began to change. Her message wasn't about sympathy. It was about ownership, about how growth begins the moment blame ends. Eventually, she recorded a short video addressed to Judy. "You didn't humiliate me," she said. "You saved me, and now I understand why." The video spread quickly again, but this time with a different response. People commented that she had changed, that she had learned. Many called it a real example of accountability. Judy, watching from her office, simply smiled. Justice isn't revenge, she told her staff. It's correction that became the true meaning behind everything that had happened. The moment that shocked millions didn't end in bitterness, it ended in growth, because in facing the consequences of her actions, Karen Foster rediscovered something she had lost long before stepping into that courtroom: humility. Still, one final chapter remained. A quiet conclusion that brought everything full circle. 6 months later, Judge Judy's team received an unexpected invitation. It wasn't from a producer or a network. It came directly from Karen Foster. This time, the letter was typed, neat, steady, composed. No shaky handwriting, no signs of distress. Just clear words from someone who had spent months rebuilding herself piece by piece. "Your Honor, I will be speaking at the Los Angeles Civic Center next week about accountability and respect in public life. The event is open to the public and supports the Courtroom Civility Foundation. I would be honored if you attended, not as my judge, but as the person who helped me see what I couldn't before." Judge Judy didn't reply immediately. She placed the envelope on her desk and stared at it for a long moment, the corner of her mouth lifting in a faint, contemplative smile. When the day of the event arrived, she quietly slipped into the back row of the packed auditorium. She wore a dark blazer, a no-name tag, seeking perspective rather than attention. The room was buzzing with nearly 200 people, lawyers, educators, social workers, and even a few viewers who had followed the viral story from the very beginning. At the podium stood a woman with a calm, steady voice and features once tied to fury and arrogance. But this was a transformed Karen Foster. Gone were the tailored suits and heavy makeup. She now wore a simple navy blouse, her tone soft but resolute. 6 months ago, she began, I was known as the woman who slapped Judge Judy's bench. I was angry, ashamed, and convinced the world was against me. But I've realized the world wasn't against me. I was against myself. The audience leaned in, captivated. Karen continued, her gaze sweeping the room, pausing occasionally to gather herself. That day in court, I believed I was defending my dignity. In truth, I was destroying it. 10 days in jail, 100 hours of quiet reflection, and 1 letter from the person I wronged taught me that respect isn't about being right. It's about being willing to listen. A soft murmur of agreement moved through the crowd. Tears glistened at the corners of her eyes as she smiled faintly. I used to think Judge Judy humiliated me. Now I know she saved me. Sometimes justice doesn't punish. It interrupts the path of a version of yourself heading toward disaster. In the back row, Judge Judy's expression softened. She didn't applaud. She didn't need to. But when Karen's eyes swept over the crowd, they lingered just a moment too long on that familiar silhouette. Their eyes met, and for an instant, the chatter of the room disappeared. No cameras, no bailiffs, no gavels, just 2 women, one who demanded respect and one who had earned it. Karen offered a small, humble nod, a gesture heavier than words or apologies could convey. For the first time in decades of rulings, reprimands, and verdicts, Judge Judy allowed herself a full, unguarded smile. After the event, as people crowded the stage to shake Karen's hand, Judy quietly slipped out a side door, leaving a small envelope on the front table. Inside was a note for Ms. Foster, keep teaching others what you've learned. Respect restored. Karen discovered it an hour later in the green room and quietly wept. The following morning, her story appeared across every major outlet under a new headline, From Karen to Courage. How a viral courtroom slap became a lesson in redemption. Social media comments surged again, but this time they weren't angry. They were inspired. People saw change, accountability, growth. Judge Judy had delivered justice, and Karen had found her peace. The woman once seen as a symbol of arrogance had become an example of transformation. Judge Judy didn't need to say another word. Her courtroom had long ago given the final verdict, justice tempered with compassion. Before the story faded, one truth remained. In Judge Judy's world, justice isn't simply punishment, it's purpose. The purpose of this case wasn't to destroy Karen. It was to show that no one is beyond redemption. When truth is faced honestly, the final image wasn't one of outrage. It was of peace. Judge Judy sitting quietly in her chambers, golden light spilling across her desk and a stack of open files beside her. She wasn't watching viral clips or scrolling headlines. She was rereading Karen's last note, ending with, "Thank you for giving me a second chance to find myself." For once, the courtroom that had witnessed tempers flare and reputations crumble was silent. Not because justice was absent, but because it had been fulfilled. A soft knock at the door brought her back to the present. "They're ready for the next case, Your Honor," the bailiff said. Judy smiled faintly, tucking the letter into her folder. "Let's give someone else their wake-up call," she said. Rising, she lifted the gavel of accountability for its next lesson. That single viral slap had grown beyond a fleeting moment of chaos. It had become a mirror for millions. It wasn't merely arrogance confronting authority. It was a lesson in how far a person can fall and how high they can rise when they face their own truth. News outlets would come to call it the redemption case. Commentators hailed it as a cultural reset for courtroom decorum. But for ordinary viewers watching on their phones or in their living rooms, it was simpler. A reminder that justice isn't about revenge, it's about restoration. In a world where outrage spreads faster than understanding, this case proved that even the harshest internet villains can find a path back if they take responsibility for their mistakes. Humility doesn't erase the past, it shapes the future. The camera slowly sweeps across Judge Judy's empty courtroom, the polished bench, the flag, the empty chairs. Then the narrator returns one final time. Perhaps the lesson isn't fear of consequences. Maybe it's respect. Respect for the law, for others, and for ourselves. When pride drowns out reason, justice quietly steps in to speak the truth. A pause lingers. If this story renewed your faith in accountability, hit that like button now. Show the world that justice humility, and personal growth still matter. Share your thoughts below. What do you think was Karen Foster's real turning point, the instant she lost control, or the moment she decided to change? And don't forget to subscribe. Next time, we'll explore another jaw-dropping courtroom story where arrogance meets authority and justice ultimately prevails. The gavel strikes one final time.